European health policies. So let me welcome Bonifác Makkai, who will introduce us to this complex and very important subject.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I hope you can hear and see me fine. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us to be part of this very important conference. And it was great, and I was thrilled to hear some of the very interesting and very important topics that has been covered during this conference. And today, I'm here on behalf of the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies, and I will be speaking about a bit of the organization, what is the aim and background of the organization, and also primarily to talk about cell and gene therapies in the context of cell and gene therapies and what can be done from a policy level to facilitate patient access to these therapies. And I know that perhaps this topic is a little bit different from those that have been covered during this 2 days conference, but I think that this topic nevertheless is extremely important for the patient community in Europe, so that we address some of the challenges the patients face in gaining access to these therapies at the European level in cooperation with the most important stakeholders in Europe. So these activities, these policies, they do have a direct impact on how these therapies will be accessed, and therefore direct impact on patients' lives. So let me just start out by saying and emphasizing really the potential of cell and gene therapies for patients around Europe. And especially, of course, the neuromuscular disorders community. Now, I believe that during this conference, there have already been several presentations and topics and discussions around cell and gene therapies. I'm not going to go too much into detail in these, maybe just to emphasize that the potential for these therapies and the potential for patients of these therapies should be made clear to policymakers and the decision makers who are responsible, making sure that patients can get these treatments. And to emphasize that, I think the main point here would be that cell and gene therapies, they differ from conventional therapies, and that it can provide long-term benefits and solutions to patients, potentially curative effects even. And it also provides, hopefully already now in certain cases, and hopefully in the near future, solutions for really unmet needs for treating patients who have no other real alternative treatment options. And here, I think, not only informing policymakers around the potential of these cell and gene therapies, but emphasizing and making sure that it's understood that access to these therapies as soon as possible is crucial for patients, especially for those that I mentioned that who do not have any alternative treatment options in this sense. So we do recognize the potential. That's quite clear. So for the neuromuscular disorders community, there are gene therapies either on the market or in the pipeline for DMD, SMA, and potentially in the future other areas as well. And this is on the medicine front. That's great news. But we also realize, or have been realizing, and by we I mean relevant stakeholders, is that the current healthcare systems, how it's in place today, may not be ready to properly integrate these medical innovations in their systems. And this is something that also the recently published pharmaceutical strategy has recognized. This is something that I will talk about a bit more later. So the question for us when we work in this area at policy level with rare diseases and innovative therapies, we asked ourselves how to facilitate patient access and prepare healthcare system, and what possible solutions could there be. So just to summarize the problem statement in this sense would be to underline that there is a great new therapies and medical innovations with huge potential coming to the market within reach for patients or going to come to the market soon. But healthcare systems may not be able to facilitate the access to these. So what can we do? And the conclusion we drew ourselves, and we wanted to make sure to make steps in this regard, is that a political solution is also needed to make sure that at a very high level we strive to make positive changes in these regards. So this is the origin of the idea of launching the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies, and I will just really speak very briefly to the background here. So earlier this year, we had this idea of by providing this political level solution to the issue, we want to make sure that we bring in policymakers who would be supporters of this initiative and the main goals here. And this is why we reached out to members of the European Parliament, present this problem and context statement to them, and bring together like-minded politicians to work with us and with other stakeholders to put forward solutions at the EU level. So in a sense, the European Alliance for Transformative Therapies is really an informal group at this stage with three main members, main supporters, members of the European Parliament: Ondrej Knotek from the Czech Republic, Claudia Gamon from Austria, and Tomislav Sokol from Croatia, who have been supporting us with our activities to complete and fulfill our objectives and with our activities. So I think one of the most important aspects of the initiative is that it really brings together various stakeholders who are key in this field to try to find solutions, including patient groups first and foremost, of course, medical experts and associations, healthcare and non-healthcare specialists, scientists, researchers, industry representatives, and really other relevant stakeholders like regulators and payers and EU-level decision makers who are very important for this to discuss these questions from the widest possible perspective. The initiative, like I mentioned, was launched earlier this year with the initial financial support by Biomarine and EUCOB, the European Confederation of Pharmaceutical Entrepreneurs, who supported us in getting this off the ground. We had an initial meeting with the three MEPs at the end of June, where we discussed the issue. We got on the same platform and aligned on a work plan that we would achieve by the end of 2020, and really that leads us into additional activities to continue in 2021. I will talk about a little bit that later at the end of the presentation. So the the multi-stakeholder approach is something that I would like to emphasize, and the work plan that we presented is really put forward two parts. The 2020 activities put forward a consensus statement, that's one area, and the other one is an official launch event. And both of these main activities, they aim to fulfill the primary aims and objectives of the group, mainly to inform policymakers about the changing dynamics of medical innovation, so that we put forward this information. We make sure that policymakers understand the huge potential of cell and gene therapies for patients. We then collaborate with decision makers regarding the most important questions, key opportunities and challenges, and to jointly build an approach that makes the most sense and really achieves the best results. And the final objective is that through these collaborations, we prepare healthcare systems for these innovative treatments so that patients can access them. With regards to the 2020 activities, the consensus statement is I would characterize it as a research and set of recommendations to achieve these objectives. We have been working together with various stakeholders, including patient groups, actually including EAMDA as well, to make sure that the most important perspectives are taken into account and that jointly with the stakeholders we find consensus on the key areas that we think are important for facilitating cell and gene therapies around Europe. And these range from various topics. Either we talk about clinical trials, the way they are done and regulated, or if we talk about implementing innovative payment models in national healthcare systems and how that can be done the best way. Or if we talk about cross-border access for patients, so that we facilitate really in a European common area for patients to try to access these treatments, even if they can't access it at the place of their living. Then, as the work is still ongoing on the consensus statement, at the same time, we aim to have an official launch of the group at the end of 2020. Actually, this event took place 2 days ago on 8th of December in the afternoon. This was also a virtual event where we had the pleasure of hosting also Mr. Tadej Korošec, president of EAMDA, who was also very a very important figure in providing us with invaluable feedbacks for the consensus statement. So we are hoping that also the perspectives and the interests of the neuromuscular disorders community will also be taken into full account. This official launch event really just served a platform to kick off the group, provide some visibility, communicate to the outside stakeholders, the stakeholders that I described before, the main aims of the group, and also discuss some of the key challenges we see around the uptake of these innovative treatments in Europe. The first and foremost outcome of the event was the launch and the publication of a call to action. This is a set of recommendations in 6 key areas where we feel that these are the central topics.
Okay, it seems that we are experiencing some technical problems and we are trying to reconnect with our speaker. It seems
Hello?
we are. Yeah? Oh, it's great to have you back.
Hello. Yes,
Yeah.
it seems that there was some technical issue. I got dropped off the call. So I think where the connection dropped off was really just a presentation of the objectives and activities of the alliance. So just to wrap up, I think the most important aspect of the 2020 activities, and especially around the official launch event that happened a couple of days ago, was the publication of a call to action that really outlines key recommendations from a policy perspective around in the context of cell and gene therapies for 6 main areas that we thought were the most important to address for the proper uptake and access to these treatment options. So the call to action, as you can see on this slide, it presents the recommendations, like I mentioned, in 6 key areas. Whether we talk about competitive clinical trials framework in Europe for cell and gene therapies, or as I mentioned before also in my presentation, whether we talk about best practices around innovative payment models and making sure that wherever in countries that have managed to put in place reimbursement systems and payment models to finance the costs of these treatments, that it can be shared across the board with other member states as well in Europe, so that they can utilize already what has been learned. Some of these countries like Spain or Germany or Italy, they have seen successfully negotiating these payment models and putting into place so that patients can access these treatments. Then we can also talk about, we also put forward recommendations regarding the infrastructures of healthcare systems in European countries, to make sure that they are well equipped in their capacities, both whether we talk about actual physical infrastructure or if we talk about the capacities of in terms of training of healthcare professionals, that's all there, and that Europe does everything it can to provide support to develop these basic requirements, so that cell and gene therapies can be available in every country. And then I also mentioned before cross-border patient access. That's also another very key topic where we discuss where we need to discuss how patients in one place of living could potentially get access to these treatments in another place, and how the current regulatory system or the current legislative system can make sure that all the tools are there to make this make this happen and make this possible. Then we can also we also put forward recommendations regarding the health technology assessments around innovative therapies, and of course this is quite critical when we talk about real-world evidence and how the evidence generation should be adapted, or it should reflect the innovative characteristics of cell and gene therapies. And here, for example, this is classically a part where a multi-stakeholder approach is essential, and where patient groups would have a very important role to make sure that a cooperation can provide these objectives. Then finally, we also put forward a recommendation to promote a modern innovation ecosystem with effective incentives. This is something that was highlighted in the recently published pharmaceutical strategy that really provides a good future objective for the legislative framework, to make sure that when we talk about development of these innovative solutions, that the proper incentives are out there, that Europe keeps and gains international competitiveness in innovation. Then I talked a lot about regulatory frameworks and legislative frameworks and legislations, and really just to pinpoint specifically what we're talking about here at the European level. I think it would be these would be the key areas. Some are more relevant than others. Obviously, the pharmaceutical strategy that the European Commission published at the end of November is really key here. In fact, on the very first page, it recognizes the value of cell and gene therapy. So it's definitely in the focus of European policymakers and regulators to make sure that these questions are answered. It foresees the review of the pharmaceutical legislation by 2022. So there are going to be plenty of opportunities to have our voices heard and push for conversations jointly with the key stakeholders in these areas, that we put in place the effective solutions to these challenges. Then we have currently, for example, the ongoing inception impact assessment of the orphan and pediatric legislations, which are of course key in this area as well. We have the already accepted, but the clinical trials regulation is an important one to consider. Then, of course, the beating cancer plan. While the beating cancer plan, in its remit, it's much more encompassing. It's quite a huge initiative for the European Union. Nevertheless, of course, for cancer patients, also cell and gene therapies offer a very important opportunity. Then, like I mentioned, again, the cross-border healthcare directive that is supposed to facilitate patient access across European borders within the European Union. Its revision under the REFIT program is also coming up at the end of next year, as per the current foreseen plans of the European Commission. So all these initiatives really will provide I would almost say unprecedented opportunities at EU policy level to make sure that during public consultations and targeted consultations, we sit down, we put forward, first of all, these recommendations, like I said, in line with the objectives of the group. We inform policymakers, we collaborate with policymakers, and then put in place these solutions within the frameworks of these policy initiatives that are effectively fulfilling the objectives of facilitating patient access in the European Union, which is going to be key for the neuromuscular disorders community as well. With this, I conclude my presentation. Just to say that in terms of 2021 and looking forward to really to next steps, what we're going to do is that once the consensus statement is finalized, we're going to disseminate it to the right people, to the right stakeholders, start conversations, keep on working with patient organizations, including EAMDA, to make sure that those perspectives are duly taken into account, that we strengthen the political support for these initiatives, and we really prioritize and focus a few key priority areas in 2021 where we can put forward concrete solutions and recommendations. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you again very much for the opportunity, and if you have any questions, I would welcome them and try to answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you. As I said during the time when you were not online, that's really one of the most challenging and important areas for rare disease community in general, not the policies. So there is the question that concerns just this. So how can you make sure that the interest of the patients are properly represented in the process of policy design?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very relevant question. Like I alluded to during my presentation before, I think what we need to make sure is that the patient community is and their perspectives are taken into account at every step of the way. That means that patient organizations and patient advocates and representatives need to be part of the conversation. They need to be brought in, and this is what we are really trying to achieve, to make sure that we sit down, we hear these perspectives, we highlight them in the concrete recommendations. So this is something that all the recommendations that we put forward are in line with the patient interests, and like I said before, the aim would be to guarantee patient access as soon as possible, and this is, I think, the policy initiatives are going to provide plenty of opportunities to do that, and we need to make sure to keep engaging with patients and hear their voices when we put forward recommendations and find solutions jointly with the policymakers and regulators.
Thank you. And another question concerns the apparent clash between the European level and the role of the member states, which are, because health remains with the competence of the member states. So how would you define the role of those European, pan-European initiatives and the European Union versus member states in this particular area?
Thank you. Yes, it is an old debate, isn't it? That when we talk about EU health policies, is that often the argument comes up that, well, at the same time, still healthcare remains a competence of member states. So what to do at an EU level if at the end it's going to be the member states who decide these things? While this is certainly an important point to keep in consideration and keep in mind, at the same time, I think the past year very well demonstrated that the EU does have a positive influence in healthcare policies, and that it fulfills a role that in some areas the EU can do a very positive benefit for the entire European Union, and it can do a better job at an EU level than if it was only left to the member states alone. At the same time, it is clear that the recommendations that we put forward, it needs to not only target EU policy level, but also member state level. This is why when I mentioned that when we talk about innovative payment system for cell and gene therapies, then we facilitate discussions across the board, across sectors, to make sure that we also share experiences across member states, and that we engage also with national level authorities, payers, and relevant stakeholders to make sure that these interests are aligned, and whatever solutions we put forward, we can jointly do. Of course, at the EU level, we have, if we talk about legislative tools like directives or regulations, that's binding for the member states to make sure that they're implementing them into their legislative systems. Of course, there are also non-legislative tools that the EU can push forward to make sure that there's an impetus between the member state to really find common solutions to problems. And I think with regards to cell and gene therapies, I think there are going to be plenty of opportunities to make sure that at an EU level we can actually do a lot, but we also engage with member states to make sure that those are implemented and for the benefits of patients.
Thank you. It's a big challenge so far as equitable access is concerned. So we keep our fingers crossed for your initiative. Thank you very much.